how is this going to play when we go through the spring and into the major summit in June in The Hague? Is NATO really going to be functioning at all by then?
Well, in a moment, we're going to be joined by Arseniy Yatsenyuk, who is former Prime Minister of Ukraine, to see what he makes of possibly the most extraordinary encounter I've ever witnessed between world leaders. But let's go now to Charlotte McDonald-Gibson, who's the Times' Washington correspondent, and Robert Fox, who's defence editor of the Evening Standard. Good evening to you both. Charlotte, let me come to you first. I mean, I was open-mouthed in astonishment. What was your response?
Absolutely. I think, in years of, following US presidents, high-level diplomacy, you can have, disagreements and disagreements are played out often at press conferences in diplomatic ways. But to have what basically descended into Donald Trump, President Trump and Vice President Vance, sort of screaming at Zelensky, who's sitting there in the room. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. And then it went on, we heard some of those exchanges there that you played, but it went on for quite a long time, a sustained amount of time when, nobody really sort of stepped in and tried to calm things down and come back to the subject on the table. So yes, as you said, it's just extraordinary. And I'm very curious to see if they're going to go ahead and hold this press conference this afternoon. I mean, is Donald Trump going to say, well, yes, Zelensky can sit up here and say what he likes about me? I mean, are they going to sign the deal? There's so many unknowns right now after witnessing that.
Do you think that when you look at how Keir Starmer handled that meeting, and, I was talking to Jonathan Ashworth, former Labour MP, just a minute ago, and put this to him as well, it must have been very hard for a Labour Prime Minister to go and flatter a very right-wing American president in the way that he did. But is that what is required to sort of make nice with Donald Trump?
Well, yes, I mean, that's what both French President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer have done this week. They've come in with bearing gifts. They've come in with sweet words, with lots of flattery, lots of enthusiasm. And, that did work for Prime Minister Starmer yesterday, and interesting, and I think there's a nice sort of comparison here. Starmer came and he presented Donald Trump with a letter from King Charles inviting him for a state visit. Zelensky came and also presented Trump with an envelope. This envelope contained pictures of the conflict. And as we understand it, casualties from the conflict. So it's a very, very different approach that Zelensky was going for, and a much more combative one. And as we can see, that hasn't worked out well for him right now. I mean, who knows what happens in the long run, but, it did not look very good.
Well, perhaps it hasn't worked out well, but I mean, he is a man of principles, and that is a point being made by messages that are pouring in from listeners here. Claude in Westminster says, I don't know why you were surprised or astonished when Zelensky was accused by the bully Trump of being a dictator and the man who started the Russian invasion. Trump blames Ukraine for covering up Hunter Biden's business dealings. That's, of course, the former president's son. So there was no love there. Thank goodness Zelensky has the courage of his convictions. Chris Westwood says this is not a row. Was POTUS, the Prime Minister of the United States, attacking and trying to extort another president? Trump is a predator. Magdalena says it wasn't great television. It was the lowest that the President of America could stoop. I was shocked listening to it. Unbelievable. And Chris, meanwhile, says underlying the anger was the clear message from the Trump regime that Zelensky must put deal-making in Trump's hands. Zelensky clearly doesn't want that. Any hope of a deal now seriously diminished. Do keep those texts and messages coming in. Text 87222. Start your message with the word Times. Tweet us at Times Radio. Email studio@times.radio, or send a WhatsApp message, picture or voice note to 0333 003 2353. Well, let's go now to Arseniy Yatsenyuk, who's former Prime Minister of Ukraine, to work out what he makes of the extraordinary scenes we've just witnessed. Arseniy, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the programme. I mean, watching that, what did you think?
Well, I've been in the Oval in 2014 with then President Obama as the first Ukrainian PM who had bilateral talks with the United States president. Frankly, that's what I didn't expect to see, frankly speaking. Okay, and I believe that Russians already popped champagne in Kremlin. That's my initial thoughts.
And are you taken aback? I mean, it almost seems to me that it's left you speechless.
Well, I tried to put aside my emotions just to lower the temperature and to stay calm, you know. And I hope that we can somehow heal this. Okay. So let's wait and see what's going to happen at the joint press conference of two presidents. And I still believe that Ukraine is to sign this mineral deal, which is not an issue for me. You know, an issue for me is how to reach the peace deal, but not the mineral deal. Because it seems that we are living in a fantasy world. Everyone is deliberating over peacekeeping force, over the mineral deal, over how to hold talks in the Oval Office. But the thing is that Putin hasn't changed his ultimate goal. He's moving every single day, okay? And the best way to get the peace deal is to provide an additional ammo to Ukrainian military to deter the Russian forces.
But, you know, you talk about the deal. Is there any prospect of it happening now when you look at the bad blood between those two presidents?
Tell me, what deal are you talking about? Peace deal or mineral deal?
Well, the one can't come without the other, according to Donald Trump. So, I mean, first the minerals and then at some point the peace deal.
Well, you know, the thing is that the mineral deal envisaged two parties, Ukraine and the United States, and the peace deal desperately needs Russians. So once again, going to the mineral deal, it's a kind of mutual win-win economic cooperation, and I expect that Ukraine and Americans will sign this deal. What I don't expect that U.S. investors are ready to put their business shoes on the ground, because we expected to have military boots on the ground. At least we're going to have business shoes on the ground, because the only reason for them to invest in Ukraine is not just only to get profits, but to secure themselves and to get ironclad security guarantees for their investment and for their business. In terms of the peace deal, once again, I don't see any kind of willingness on the side of war criminal Putin to cut the deal with Ukraine and to stop this war. And
you said
after what I've seen, my guess is that this even triggered Putin more to push forward and to press on Ukraine.
And you said there would be champagne corks popping in the Kremlin. Do you think that, you know, Zelensky, you talked about trying not to be emotional. Should Zelensky himself have set aside his emotions and flattered, cajoled Donald Trump in the way that some other world leaders have tried to? Would that have been better for Ukraine's future?
Look, I expected to see charm offensive. What I saw was just offensive. But once again, I believe that they will come to terms, and everyone is to come to their own senses, and we're going to handle this, okay? There is no other option for us as for Ukrainians and actually for Americans, you know, because the world is closely watching. If the leader of the free world wants to stay as the leader of the free world, they have to invest into the Ukraine's security. And the political show, it was maybe the best ever political show I have ever seen. I wish not to see this kind of show. But this is the world we are living in, okay? So we have to handle this.
Arseny, don't go away, because I want to come back to you in a second. But let's bring in Robert Fox, defence editor of the Evening Standard now. You heard there from Arseny, you know, best political show. Was it a kind of premeditated act, do you think, by Donald Trump to have that bust up, extraordinary scenes, you know, extraordinary rudeness? Was that a sort of deliberate move, do you think, by Donald Trump?
Jerry Springer, The Apprentice, reality TV. Yeah, it's a show, isn't it? You can just tell what the musical will be like in about 6 years' time. I think this was orchestrated. A friend of mine who knows the scene very well. And of course, with MAGA, Zelensky is, I'm sure Charlotte will comment on this, is quite high up the figure and of the numbers and hierarchy of hate figures. I think we are nowhere near seeing what the deal will be, but I'd be very interested to hear from Arseny that my impression is that actually Russia wants a deal, however temporary, just purely in what is going on in the ground. It cannot go on at this tempo without an operational pause, and that is what it will look like. The problem is they've both got form, but particularly Putin has got form. He has broken almost every major agreement under the sun, and isn't even very keen on strategic arms limitation talks. And it is going to be very, very difficult for Trump to say that I am going with Putin. Where does it leave NATO? It leaves NATO and an alliance actually which still matters to America. It may not sound like it from out of the lips of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, but they're going to need it. And that's what I'm thinking now. How is this going to play when we go through the spring and into the major summit in June in The Hague? Is NATO really going to be functioning at all by then?
Well, let's pause that thought for a second. Let's just recap here, because what we've heard in the last half hour or so has been pretty unprecedented, I'd say. So let's just replay some of that exchange, which began to get heated when Volodymyr Zelensky interjected while the vice president was speaking.
I will respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied it, our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now the President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact line?
2015.
2014
2014.
and 2015.
2014.
Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but
That's exactly right.
Yes, but during 2014 till 2022, yeah, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped.
Well, from there, it only got more uncomfortable.
And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's
with
back
all
to
respect to
you.
you.
Far more than a lot of people said
With
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once this
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting, have
today.
you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
And this after President Zelensky warned of the war coming to the West.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's exactly
Remember
what
this.
you're doing.
I'm not
You're in
dictating.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very
you will
good.
Feel influenced.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influenced.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the
bad
very
position,
beginning
and he
of the
happens
war.
to be right about
From the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not in a
Mr.
good position.
I
You don't
was
have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not playing
cards.
cards.
Right now, you don't.
I'm very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
what you're
You're
speaking
gambling
about?
with
What you're
World
speaking
War
about?
III.
Let me bring in Arseniy Yatsenyuk again, former Prime Minister of Ukraine. To hear your president having to say, I'm not playing cards, when your country, men and women are in danger, what did you think at that point?
We sacrificed too much. And that's not just an issue that we lost 20% of Ukrainian territory. So we lost hundreds of thousands of people, men and women in the uniform, civilians. More than 6 million people fled the country. Ukraine's economy is in shatters, and there is no longer long-lasting peace in Europe. And this is the biggest military conflict that Russia waged after the Second World War. So if we go to the basics, I believe that everyone is to be on our side in terms of just normal human feelings, okay? But it's a realpolitik, and in this realpolitik, in order to survive, we have to be out of the box, creative, and find a way to launch charm offensive, bromance, and the rest of the stuff in order to get what we need, in order to get what is needed for the Ukrainian people. And I still believe that, look, once again, we will handle this, and I commend your Prime Minister, Starmer, who did well just yesterday, and French President Macron. And I still hope that now, behind the closed doors, my president and President Trump will get along. Well, I do understand that it's practically unrealistic, but I still believe in miracles, you know? I still believe in them. I believe in the Statue of Liberty.
I like your optimism. Let me bring Robert Fox back in, defence editor of the Evening Standard. How do you think that spectacle will be viewed in America, but also around Europe? Do you think it will increase support in Europe for Zelensky or not?
I'm not sure. I think it's a real concern. It's very interesting listening to Arsene and comparing this to the meetings with Macron and Keir Starmer. What's happened today is a setback, actually, for what those two were trying to do, which was to try and keep America on side, on board, interested in the affairs of Europe and interested in the idea of NATO. And remember, NATO starts out geographically from the North Atlantic Treaty area, from the Atlantic to the Urals, in the famous phrase. If Russia, if we are seeing from this, the play out will be, I wash my hands of it, a plague on both your houses, and there will be a deal with Russia, we're in a very, very bad case, because it goes back to the famous quip of the first Secretary General of NATO, Lord Ismay, Churchill's great buddy. The purpose of the alliance at the very beginning, the late 40s, was to keep the Russians out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. All that seemed to, we have a strong sense that all that is going to bits now.
Robert, let me just break in there because there's a new statement coming out from Donald Trump now, which is another extraordinary development. He says, and this is according to CNN, I've determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage. I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. That just in from President Trump. Let me go to Arseny Yatsenyuk for a response to that, the former Prime Minister of Ukraine. Arseny, it sounds as if Donald Trump has washed his hands of your president.
Worst case scenario unfolding right now. Okay, so now we need new mediators, new envoys to the White House, somehow to repair the damage. Okay.
You sound broken by this.
Well, how could I be happy? You know, once again, I can reiterate that I know for sure who is happy right now. War criminal Putin. And he is not the only one, okay? And the gang of others, axis of evil.